welcome to the February 4th, 2025 Great Town Council workshop. Tonight is our first budget workshop, budget season, I'll call it, for lack of a better term. So we'll start with roll call. Mike, can you hear me, Mike? I don't think.
Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is with us tonight. He doesn't know it yet, but he's online and I can see him, so we'll catch his attention and get him to, can you hear me? You're muted.
I can hear you now, yes. Yep.
For some reason, we're not getting any sound from you, Mike.
We're not getting sound from the Zoom. Can you hear us, Mike?
No.
Okay,
Yep,
he said
good.
he can.
All right, well, we know you're here, so we'll continue with roll call. Levi?
Present.
Krista?
Present.
Ann?
Present.
My name's Dan McGuire, Council Manager. I'm present. To my right is our Town Manager, Mike Foley. And I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Sure, I think the first item would be to potentially offer any public comment, public input on if you wanted, or I do have a brief presentation about the budget in general that I could go through, and then we could have public comment after.
I think it might be nice to do it that way, because
Okay.
then people would have something to react to.
Great, let me bring up my presentation here.
Oh my gosh, it seems worse than all this noise.
I think it is that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a presentation up here that has some brief information about the upcoming budget. I just wanted to share with the council and members of the public. I wanted to talk about some budget challenges, some opportunities, some goals, and then just let people know, hypothetically, should there be increases in spending, what that might look like for the tax rate. And so some of the budget challenges that we're going to be facing is the state budget. One of the things that's happened in the last few years with the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the inflation, there has been continued growth in revenues as part of the state budget. When there's growth in revenues, one of our major non-property tax revenues, the municipal revenue sharing program, does typically see growth and improvements. At the same time, valuations are growing. So we here in Gray have seen some growth in those figures in recent years. Those are kind of leveling off for people. So aside from for many large valuation changes, there is pretty much a level forecast for municipal revenue sharing for the town of Gray. There are other factors in the state budget that may or may not have a positive or a negative effect on the municipal budget. We know there's a number of proposals as part of general assistance, the general assistance program. So we'll see if and how those affect the municipal budget. And then there's a number of other departments and bills that might be considered as part of the legislative session. So we'll continue to monitor those and see if there's any impacts in the days and weeks ahead as we work to potentially to present a municipal budget to the town in March. The other item that's become of recent concern is in the change of presidential administrations is the federal tariffs and federal funding. So there was a brief notice last week that all federal funding was frozen, and we haven't seen any like official notice, but there's talk all over news media that it's been rescinded. And so we haven't had situations where we haven't been able to request or receive any federal funding, but we do have a number of ongoing projects that involve federal funding, one of which is our Brownfields program, and a CDS grant, a congressionally directed spending grant that the town had received. So we're concerned that about those, and we'll continue to monitor those. And then the federal tariffs, I've recently learned that they've been stopped for Canada and Mexico, but we have had vendors that have notified us about potential increases in services due to the tariffs, primarily in some of our commodities like fuel and gas. And so those will definitely have a potential impact on the municipal budget. We were working on a long-term agreement with our propane provider, Irving, and they advised they weren't going to be doing any long-term agreements given the uncertainty with the tariffs. And so we'll be basically budgeting for the market in that budget line. And so we'll have some challenges there that we'll continue to monitor. Our friends at county government are reporting to us that they may have an increase of approximately 6 to 8%. I think they're closer to the 6% number, and so we may or may not see that amount of increase, and that does have an effect into the municipal tax rate when the county budget, the school department budget, and the municipal budget are combined. And so that will have an effect on the tax rate. And then the other item that's of concern or challenge is law enforcement staffing. As I shared with the council last budget season, when I arrived, our partners at the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department indicated to us that we are understaffed in our sheriff's patrol for the town of Gray, and that they've recommended potentially incremental improvements into staffing. I think as I pointed out last year, we are a similar sized community to the town of Standish and have a similar amount of call volume, and they have 8 or 9 contract deputies versus our 2. And so they don't suggest that we jump up to the 8 or 9, but that we maybe work to potentially add some coverage. Currently, our coverage, we only have contract deputies on Wednesday through Saturday from 7 a.m. until 2 a.m. And so there's some overnight gaps and also some Sunday through Wednesday or Sunday through Tuesday gaps that we might want to work to develop a plan to cover. So I'm working on, as we assemble the entire budget, we've received pricing from them for the current law enforcement staffing, which has increases. And if we were to increase, potentially exploring a half-year increase on doing that, or work to potentially put aside funds for some of the capital costs associated with some increased staffing, and then maybe do it in a future budget year. So I'm waiting to see how the whole budget shakes out before I provide a recommendation for that. But in advance of our budget meeting, the chair and I worked on getting some of the outside groups that we partner with, which I'll report on during our town manager's report in the town council meeting. But the sheriff's department's going to come and speak to us in advance of the budget on March 4th as part of a workshop, just to kind of share with us some data and some of their recommendations. But they understand, we're trying to keep the community affordable, and so they'll work with us with what we are able to find best appropriate. We're finding continued cost increases as a result of inflation